Welcome to Trending World Now, where facts meet insight. We bring you deeply researched documentaries and stories that uncover the truth behind today's most important global trends. No fiction, just facts that shape our world.
There are very few organizations out there that get people as fired up as the World Economic Forum. Seriously, you ask one person and they'll tell you it's just a talking shop for the super rich. Ask someone else and they'll say it's a huge force for good in the world. Then you've got the people who are convinced it's a shadowy cabal plotting to take over, and some who think it's, well, something much, much weirder. So in this explainer, we're going to journey through that entire spectrum of belief. And so much of the debate, it all seems to circle around this one single phrase. The WEF put it out there back in 2016. Just 8 words. But man, did they launch 1,000 theories. You will own nothing, and you'll be happy. So what was that? A prediction? Some kind of utopian promise? Or was it a threat? So let's get to the heart of it. What is the World Economic Forum really? And why does it provoke such powerful, intense reactions? Well, that's what we're here to figure out. We're going to peel this thing back like an onion, layer by layer. We'll start with their official story, then look at the mainstream criticisms, and then we're going to get into some of the wildest interpretations out there.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Before we get into all the drama, we've got to understand what this organization actually is. What does the World Economic Forum say about itself?
So this whole thing didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It actually started way back in 1971. A German professor, Klaus Schwab, he gets this idea to host a meeting for European business leaders. Pretty straightforward, but oh boy, did it grow. By 1987, it wasn't just European anymore. It became the World Economic Forum. Then things start getting interesting. By 96, there are allegations it's influencing Russian elections through something called the Davos Pact. Fast forward to 2000, and they're launching Gavi, the huge global vaccine alliance. And then 2020 hits, the pandemic, and the WEF introduces its biggest, most talked about idea ever, the Great Reset. Okay, so if you look at their official mission statement, it sounds pretty good, right? They want to improve the state of the world. And how do they plan to do that? By getting the top dogs from business, politics, academia, all the leaders in one room to figure out the world's biggest problems. The goal sounds noble, but it's that key part, getting all the most powerful people in one room. Well, that's where things start to get complicated. Because getting into that room, it costs money, a lot of money. Just look at this number, $628,000. That's the annual fee for a company to be a top-level strategic partner. So right away, this isn't some public town hall, it's an exclusive club. And that fact alone, that exclusivity, is a huge part of why people are so suspicious. All right, let's talk about the idea that really exploded the WEF into the public consciousness for millions of people, the Great Reset. This was rolled out right in the middle of the 2020 pandemic, and it was pitched as this big opportunity to rebuild a world that felt, well, broken. So the big idea at the heart of the Great Reset is something called stakeholder capitalism. And this is a really big shift in thinking, okay? So the old school way, traditional capitalism, says a company's #1 job is to make money for its shareholders, period. But stakeholder capitalism? It says, whoa, hold on. It argues that companies have a responsibility to everyone they impact. We're talking employees, customers, the local community, even the planet itself. It's a totally different way of looking at business. So you're probably asking, how do they plan on doing all that? Well, their plan basically has 3 main parts or pillars. First, they want to tweak the markets to make them fairer, with things like progressive taxes and better rights for workers. Second, they want to make sure huge investments go towards shared goals like sustainability and the green economy. And third, and this one is a biggie, they want to harness the 4th industrial revolution. Think AI, genetic engineering, all that futuristic stuff, and steer it for what they call the public good. And this brings us right back to that infamous phrase, you'll own nothing, because it perfectly shows how 2 groups of people can look at the exact same idea and see completely different things. On one side, the supporters see a future of convenience. It's about access over ownership. Think about it. You don't buy DVDs anymore. You subscribe to Netflix. You don't buy CDs. You use Spotify. That's the idea. But on the other side, the critics hear those words and see a terrifying future. To them, it means the end of private property. It means being totally dependent on massive corporations for everything you need, a recipe for total control. Okay, so this leads us directly into the first big layer of criticism. And for this one, you really don't need a tinfoil hat. This is the stuff that a lot of people are asking. Is the World Economic Forum just a fancy club for the super rich and powerful to get together and push their own agendas? When you look at the common mainstream critiques, they point to some really fundamental problems. First off, there's zero democratic accountability. Nobody elected these people, right? Then there's the fact that it gives huge corporations a private backdoor way to influence public policy, far away from any public oversight. A lot of people also point out the hypocrisy, especially when it comes to climate change. We'll get to that in a sec. And then there's this growing concern about debanking, the idea that your access to money could be cut off if you don't fall in line. And yeah, let's talk about that hypocrisy charge for a second, because this one really seems to stick. So the WEF is a huge advocate for radical climate action. They want to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, but then you look at their big annual meeting in Davos. In 2025, there were over 1,300 private jets flying in and out. Think about that carbon footprint. It's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do, and you can see why it rubs people the wrong way. The optics are just terrible. And really, it all boils down to this feeling, perfectly captured by this old saying, it's a big club and you ain't in it. That sense of being on the outside, looking in, it's probably the biggest single reason for all the distrust. All right, now we're going to peel back another layer, and this is where things take a turn. This is where simple criticism starts to morph into full-blown conspiracy theory, where the WEF isn't just seen as an elite club, but as a key player in a long-term, deliberate plan for total global control. To really get a handle on these theories, you have to look at the founder himself, Klaus Schwab. People who hold this viewpoint point to his personal history. He was born in Germany in 1938. During World War II, his father was a director at a company that, according to records, collaborated with the Nazi regime. Then, later in the 60s, Schwab studies at Harvard, and his mentor is none other than Henry Kissinger, a guy who literally wrote the book on power-based global strategy. Now, for people who believe this, none of this is a coincidence. They see it as a clear blueprint for his intentions. So, what's the core fear here? It's something critics call a technocratic coup d'etat. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. The theory goes that the WEF's whole model, this stakeholder thing, is just a fancy way to slowly but surely replace our democratically elected governments. And replace them with what? With a new kind of ruling class, an unelected global council of CEOs and so-called experts making all the decisions for us. And, of course, theorists point to specific events as evidence, as Exhibit A, B, and C. They'll bring up 1996 and the Davos Pact, which they say was orchestrated at the forum to get their chosen candidate elected in Russia. They'll point out that the whole idea for the G20, one of the most powerful global bodies today, was actually cooked up at a Davos meeting. And then they'll point to more recent stuff, like reports from the Wall Street Journal about internal scandals, alleging a pretty toxic culture of harassment and power abuse inside the WEF itself. And now we've reached the final layer, the deepest and by far the most extreme interpretation. At this level, we leave politics and economics completely behind. Here, the World Economic Forum is seen through a totally different lens, a supernatural, apocalyptic one. It's viewed as a major piece of the puzzle in the biblical end of days. This entire viewpoint is often expressed through prophetic visions, like this one someone reported having in January 2023. Listen to the language here. The serpents are coming for their unholy seed. We're not talking about stakeholder capitalism anymore, are we? We're talking about gods, serpents, resurrection. It's a completely different reality, a totally different framework for making sense of things. So, according to this vision, the whole Davos meeting we see on the news, that's just a cover story. The real event is a dark, secret ritual. The story goes that ancient DNA, supposedly from fallen angels called the Nephilim, is used to bring back ancient gods, like the Egyptian goddess Isis, from some kind of stasis pods. The Antichrist himself is said to be there, personally overseeing the whole resurrection. And once these entities are revived, they're set loose on the earth to bring about an age of darkness. So, there you have it, the whole spectrum, 3 totally different lenses to view the very same organization. Is the World Economic Forum a genuine forum for progress, a place where smart people are trying to fix the world's problems? Or is it a sinister plot for control, a slow-moving coup by the global elite? Or is it something else entirely, a spiritual sign that the end times are here? When you get right down to it, the story of the World Economic Forum really is a story about interpretation. And maybe, just maybe, this whole massive, passionate debate, Maybe it tells us less about what's happening in Davos and more about us, about our own fears, our distrust, and the deep fractures running through our modern world. The real question isn't just what is the WEF, it's which one of these stories makes the most sense to you.